Good morning, everybody. We're going to be starting in a few minutes, giving people a chance to join in. The meeting is being recorded by Jisc, and we'll put it up on the site afterwards, and we will also put up any of the slides as well. So I'm just going to go on mute for a moment and let everybody join, and then we'll start in a few. Hopefully everybody can see the screen, so a thumbs up would be great about now. Okay, it's 11:32, and I think as many people as are going to join are here now. So as I said before, we are recording this meeting, and there'll be a transcript afterwards as well. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat as well as the other various elements of using Zoom. What I intend to do is to very quickly run through a set of slides, and the slides have got all the information that I hope you'll need after the webinar. I'm going to take probably 30 minutes to go through it. I want to have plenty of time for discussion, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to wrap up a little early, because I know that this is just before lunch and people will be wanting to get off to lunch. So if everybody's okay, if everybody can see the screen and hear me okay, just give me a quick thumbs up again and I'll get started. And it's great to see so many people that are regulars. Okay, so I'm going to start. So this webinar is focused on social connectivity, and the social connectivity that we've been looking at, especially during the pandemic. It's been a lot going on. There's obviously been a lot of changes in the sector, and people have had to cope in very different ways. What I'm going to do is just talk through some of those issues. So what I'll talk about is the importance of social connections. I'm going to talk a little bit about the research that we're doing in Jisc and how we actually started to identify some of these things. I'm going to talk a little bit about the strategies and structures, the questions that you might be asking about social connectivity in your context. And then I'm going to have time for plenary and discussion. Please use the chat function throughout the webinar and also talk to each other. And if you've got ideas that you want to share about how to stay connected and things like that, then please also share those in the chat pane as well. First of all, I want to say thank you to people that have been helping me with the research and in putting these together. So thanks to Tanya Usherwood-Pye from the University of Nottingham, Ken Bauer-Favell from the University of Monterey, Donald Anklo, University of North Carolina, Charlotte. We've got a Jisc R&D team that have done lots of interviews during the pandemic about how academic staff are coping and the sorts of things that have been coming up in issues. Also, all the images in this presentation, with the exception of slide 8, are CC0 and they're licensed from Pixabay. Image on slide 8 is courtesy of Paul Bailey. Okay, so what do we mean by social connectivity? We found this definition to be useful in thinking in terms of what people are actually talking about. So social connectivity encompasses the relationships, the networks, the links that people have with other people or groups, whether these be with neighbors, family, friends, sporting social groups, with students, with anybody that comes into contact in that circle. And the social connection is about people we know, the friends we confide in, the family we belong to, and the community that we live in. And of course, during the crisis, it's been very difficult. There's been that disruption. And I think most people have had that interruption to normal service. And that's impacted people in very different ways. If you're used to working from home, if you hardly ever go into meetings outside of the digital spaces, for example, you may be experiencing it less. But some people who constantly work in very, very vibrant, noisy spaces have been suffering quite a lot during the pandemic. But it's a range of different reactions to it, and we don't know how people react to it until they've experienced it. But it's not actually just about the pandemic. Anyone can become socially isolated at any time. For some people, it's a mix of circumstances that makes it very difficult. And for some people, that's a lifelong experience. For others, it could be something that happens in their life that leads to a lesser or diminished social interaction. There could be social and structural barriers that contribute to social exclusion. For many years, I worked in the disability sector, and I saw lots of disabled people, and especially disabled students, who found it very difficult to socially connect at university, but also in their wider lives. So the degree of impact from social isolation is linked to the resources that people have as well. How can you cope with these changes in your life will depend on what you've got available to you. While we're going through this conversation, I just want people to think about what examples of social isolation they've seen other than the pandemic, and what you've seen, especially in your students. If you just want to type some of those into the chat box. One of the hard things about doing the Zoom calls is you can't actually see if anybody is typing. So it's a high risk activity to ask people to do. Yeah, bullying is a really good one. We've been very lucky in our research that we haven't come across people mentioning that. And I don't know if that's because of the pandemic, but bullying can actually be a big impact on social isolation. Yeah, the first gen student experience as well. Yeah, halls. That Simon is really important. The accidental exclusion, because the communications have just failed, is something we see a lot of. And Chris retreated into their own household and don't want to meet with friends. Yeah, that happens. It could be all sorts of pressures that make people do that. Oh, imposter syndrome is a really good one. And we see that in workplace and with students. It's almost like the first generation thing where imposter syndrome does become an impact. Oh, that's yep. So it depends on the technology that you use as well. That could be an impact. Yeah, and the short-term nature of some courses, they're not here long enough to actually build up that kind of social framework and social network that can help them to have a better experience. So all of these are issues. Um, what I want to do is very quickly talk about the research that we've done and where that's come from, and so that I can give you some examples of some of the social isolation that we've seen in our work. Just to give a shout out to the Jisc research team, this is them. Paul Bailey supplied the photograph. This is what they look like, and the blog there is, if you just do a search for co-design and Jisc, you should be able to find the work that we do. But what we've done during the pandemic, and this is the team talking to people, is we go out and we've been interviewing academics, we've been interviewing senior leaders, and we've been interviewing students. And the purpose of that research is to identify the kinds of practices that have been going on during the pandemic as a way of informing the sorts of development that we've been doing, and the sorts of development that we might want to do longer term to help the sector with different tools, with different processes and technologies. So that's what we did. At the moment, I think we've done well over 150 hours of interviews with people, and possibly a lot more than that now. And we found all sorts of really, really interesting practices. But very early on, we started to identify that social connectivity was becoming an issue. It's not a surprise, but the way that it was reported to us was really interesting. So in the first 6 weeks of interviews that we did, so these were in sort of March and April of last year, as we started going into lockdown, we saw these sorts of comments. In the old world, you could just knock on an administrator's door. Now you have to email. Some students have embraced technology to communicate with staff. Some students haven't felt the need and are just getting on with things. There are quite a lot of colleagues I haven't had contact with for weeks, maybe 1 or 2 emails. There's just that sense of not knowing how people are doing because you're not in contact with them. I'm not sure why people aren't in contact with them, but these are the sorts of things that we saw coming out of the interviews when we were just asking general questions about what they do and how their practice is going. As time went on, these sorts of things were coming through the interviews. At first we said, oh, we must have, coffee, virtual coffee mornings and things like that, but it hasn't happened. Colleagues made an attempt to get conversations going on Teams, including posting pet photographs, things like that. Very few people took part. I think the reaction in general in the college has just been, batten down the hatches and do what you can. That's typical of us as a college, neglecting that social side of things. It's always been a problem, and now it's a bigger problem. And then towards the end of 2020, these sorts of things were coming in. There are colleagues I haven't heard from, particularly those with young children, and I'm concerned about how they're doing. We need to be able to talk more informally and be able to sort things instead of having 10 emails. I need to be able to just have a conversation. This one really sort of made us think. I'm glad to be taking part in the research. I live alone and I haven't had a proper, with voices conversation in over a month. And that was really sort of quite worrying to us. We weren't specifically looking for what was happening with social connectivity. These were things that people were just saying to us. And so having sort of identified lots of these things that were happening with social connectivity, and I should say that we also identified lots of good practice in social connectivity, and I'm going to share some of those with you as we go through the next section. But I also hope that if people are doing things that are really good practices to stay connected, they'll be shared in the group chat as well. But these are the things that really stood out and made us think about what can we do about the fact that social connectivity seems to be a problem. So what can we do? And what we decided is that we, rather than sort of saying this is the strategy that you should have to go away and implement for social connectivity, we thought the best way to do this was to frame 6 questions about social connectivity that you can apply to your own context, because everybody's context is going to be different. So what can we do? Think about what people need. One of the things that we found is really helpful is that some of the teams that were getting together had group interests, but they also took part in meaningful activities. They gave time in those meaningful activities to have a laugh, to be connected and talk about things outside of tasks. So that balancing of the task and social interaction is really key. So, not just saying we are now online, we need to answer these questions and then we're going to go offline. It's about recognizing that if we'd have come together in the office, we'd have talked about things. So it's actually balancing that task and social interaction. A culture of caring and trust, asking how people are, asking if people want to chat, thinking about the difference. What are the differences between the access that people have? Do people have caring responsibilities that they can't be online at certain times? It could be a range of things, but you have to think about that difference and what people are doing. And you have to manage expectations. There's not a fix for not being able to get together and have a meeting. There's not a fix for feeling better about being isolated. So we have to manage expectations about what we're able to do and what people need. We can't do everything. The other thing to say is that we found that some small teams, 2 or 3 people, especially in some universities, only communicated with 2 or 3 people. And so we found that people that widen their team communications and work within a larger community seem to be able to have more social resilience when it comes to communicating during the pandemic. What physical environment are people in? I'm actually really lucky. I work from home a lot and I've got my own office. Ironically, today, because I'm doing a webinar, my neighbors have got builders in replacing their roof. And at any moment, I'm terrified that I'm going to start having drilling and banging going on. But that's reality. And that's what happens sometimes. And other people are going to be in homes that are very crowded. We've heard students that don't have their own space at home. And one of the reasons that they went to university is they actually wanted to get away from that crowded home life and actually get back on campus. One university has been telling me that they've had lots of requests from students who know that they're going to be isolated if they come on campus, but they want to come on campus because they want Wi-Fi and they want to be in a room on their own and not be bothered by siblings. So we've heard these sorts of stories. Going forward, some people may be remote, some people might not. Some people might be working on campus as we start to come out of lockdown. What does that look like, and how do we actually make sure that there's something that gels those 2 cohorts of people together? The right equipment is key, and I know it's difficult right now. I'm really lucky. I've got a monitor in front of me and my laptop off to one side, so doing a webinar and being able to look into the screen is really easy. But also, I've got a good desk with a good keyboard, and I'm not going to suffer with my hands or with RSI. But long-term working on a small laptop propped up on a few books is not good for anybody. We also, my wife works locally, and she's been actually going for walks with her colleagues, socially distanced, making sure they meet the government guidelines, but actually going for a walk and being able to talk, but at 2 or 3 meters away, is possibly something that you could do as we come out of the more stringent lockdown rules. She hasn't been able to do it obviously since the new lockdown, but during the summer that was something that was really working. Who's at risk? This is a really important one. It's important to know the indicators that someone is experiencing. That person that said to us, I've not had a conversation with somebody with voices for a month, is something that really flagged with me. And it's like, do you mind if I tell your line manager that? And we actually did say that. But you've got to look at these and look at are people participating, or are they withdrawing from the activities that you're putting on? Are they just coming online to do tasks and then disappearing? That reduced social contact. Are they less confident? Is there an inability to get to their usual coping skills following a crisis? There's been all sorts of people in all sorts of crises in the last 12 months, and that changes the way that we cope with things. And I've seen that on a personal level, and I've seen it with my colleagues as well. We've got to be able to, understand that access to some coping skills disappears in a crisis. And that lack of availability that you might normally have has disappeared. So what can we do about that? And understanding that some people are at risk is key. So consider initiatives to contact isolated people. Check with HR. HR are brilliant at this sort of thing, or our HR team is. But knowing about mental health first aid, knowing about making sure that you're staying in touch with people that might be at risk is key, especially during this current time. What are the specific barriers that people are facing? How does your team like to engage? And what are the things that are happening that might stop them doing that? Is it time? Is it access to tools? Is it other commitments? Are we just putting too much workload on people? And the activities that you put in place, are they fully inclusive? I've heard stories of people that have been doing all sorts of things. I've been doing a thing called EdTech Coffee, and people come along and we just have a chat. And my friend Ken Favell from Monterey, he does a educators coffee, and people just turn up every day and have coffee and just chat about things. But I also know that people have been doing like Zoom drinks and things like that. And some people just don't want to be around alcohol, or it might be the time when people have been putting their children to bed or things like that. So it's making sure that the activities that we are planning to get people engaged with are fully inclusive, or at least some of them are fully inclusive, so that people can participate in different things. And sometimes you have to also make the effort to attend, even if you don't want to, because somebody might really need you to be there. The other key that we've seen during this is that leaders need to be able to model the social connectivity behaviors they want to see in their staff. It's got to be present at all levels, or it's just not working. Again, at Jisc, we've been really lucky in that we've got some really good behaviors from our leadership teams who've been really caring throughout the pandemic. But just having a leader pick up the telephone and say, hey, how are you doing, can have a massive impact on somebody. And when that comes down from the top, what you see is people giving permission to actually go and contact other people, not to do performance reviews or to manage what work they're doing, but just checking in. And when you see leaders just checking in with people to make sure that they're well, you see that kind of culture developing across an organization, and people stay connected in much better ways. And the other thing is to identify what you can do to reinforce the existing social connectivity. There's already a lot of things that are in place that really work. So don't replace them. Do the things that are working. And then when we emerge from the right now, think about those practices and spaces that really work and you might want to grow and promote. What are the things that you can do going forward about social connectivity that might actually improve things? Because that's going to be really key. And one of the things that we've we've heard about during the pandemic is that when people start to feel isolated, when they don't feel connected to others, sometimes productivity goes down. So being able to sort of make sure that social connectivity is in place will pay dividends for people that are trying to actually, get work done. It absolutely helps you to get things done. And I just want to sort of just recap on those 6 questions that we suggest that people think about. What do people need? What environment are they in? Who's at risk? What are the specific barriers? What leadership behaviors are you seeing? And what can you do to reinforce the existing social connectivity? And these are the things that should inform strategic approaches to making sure that social connectivity is there for your teams and for the wider environment that you're working in. And most of what we've covered today is common sense. I think, people that are coming to webinars may be coming to webinars as a way of engaging socially with other people. So it's important to know that we know how to do these things. We're social people most of the time, but we need to be able to sort of emphasize how important social connectivity is. And again, this idea that, the better that we connect, the better we are at productivity. So those are some of the things that I just wanted to sort of get across. And it's, again, thinking about those questions to inform the strategy that you want to put in place, or the changes that you want to make sure people are socially connecting. And again, the slides will be made available. I'm just going to open it up. And what I'm really interested in is hearing from people about the sorts of things that they've done during the pandemic. And I can see that there's actually been a lot of discussion. And I'm just wondering if somebody wants to unmute and actually tell us some of the things that they've been doing. Somebody's unmuted, but I can't see who it is.
Can I come in here? It's very quiet. I'll open the platform.
Excellent. Sorry. And sorry, who am I speaking to?
I am Naeem Pathan. I work at the Demantford University.
Hi, Naeem.
Hi. So what we started was probably sometime in November was a tea and coffee get together for staff, because I felt that there was nobody was connecting as we did before. And the only condition was nobody to talk about work. It was just a formal, just come and have a chit chat. And it was a super hit, and it worked very well. A lot of people attended it. And now we're doing it every month. We do it once a month, and it's working very well, I think. That's what we did.
Excellent. Kieran, you suggested the online virtual study sessions. Is that for students? I'm hoping Kieran is still there. No, we've lost Kieran. The online study sessions are intended to bring work and bring students together and allow them to work alongside their peers in an online environment. We've seen people running things called Shut Up and Write, where people can come together online, but you don't actually have to say anything, but that co-presence and just sort of having that time together online to write, to work, and knowing that there's somebody else, even if it's just like this online, has been really useful. Lisa, do you want to tell us about the networks that you're running? You can't unmute. Let me try and unmute you. We seem to be able to.
Hi.
There we go.
Hi. Yes, we have.
No, lost you again, Lisa. It's muted.
Hi.
There we go. Sorry, please tell us about the staff networks.
We have an equality, diversity and inclusion officer who was put on a number of staff networks. So we have a solo network for people who live by themselves. We have a disability network. We have an LGBTQ plus network, amongst other ones that we've put in place. We've also set up a group called I'm Currently Binging On. So it's like an informal group where they can talk about films, books, podcasts that they've been listening to. And we've also started a lunchtime initiative once a month. So for half an hour, it's just to encourage staff to actually take back their lunchtime, switch off from work. And we had our first event last week, which was a pottery demonstration. And we have another one due this month where we're going to be talking to an author. But we're quite fortunate that we have quite a lot of arts and creative academics who are quite eager to be on board. So we have things like book binding, calligraphy. So it just seems to be working really well.
That does, book binding sounds amazing to do online. We have seen a growth in craft workshops online, which I found really interesting. The people just getting together to do things online it just, you know, this seems to have been a changing point from what we've been doing. Alex has asked the question. Alex, you've said in the chat that you have a hearing impairment and find it difficult when people talk over each other. If you don't want to unmute and ask or talk about what that feels like, then I understand, but it would be good if you would like to.
Yeah, that's fine. It's not a problem. Hold on, I'll just put myself on as well. Hi.
There you go.
Hi. Yeah, it's not, I'm not, unfortunate, I don't have, it's not extreme, but I have significantly impaired hearing in one ear. And I've noticed it's particularly hard now with everyone masked up that I've realized how much I was relying on watching people's lips move. When it comes to Zoom meetings and things, I do struggle sometimes, especially when there's a group and people are sort of talking over each other, and you know, you get everyone gets excited, and it does. I'm usually very outgoing, and in meetings sort of in before the before the pandemic would, you know, really join in, and I do find myself stepping back, which is a little bit of a concern, because I don't want that to become something that's a habit, but it's easier to step back and just let everyone else do it, and then, you know, I pick up bits and pieces than really put myself sort of within it and realize I've missed something, or, you know, look a bit silly because I've repeated something someone's already said.
Have you found any mechanisms to overcome it yet, or are you still exploring that?
No, I mean, I've got this headset which I was bought through work, that has helped a bit. I've also had a new laptop. We realised mine was from 2013 and wasn't really fit for purpose, so that's helped with the microphone issues, but no, it's not, there's nothing else specific that I've come across yet.
So there's a cultural piece that it's just making sure that people know not to talk over people, and sort of just being polite. We're very lucky in my team. Actually, I've just noticed my team have started to appear in the chat, and you know, we have a regular stand-up, and I think people after a while have started to learn not to speak over each other, which has been useful. But sometimes that does, you lose a bit of the energy sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, and I think sometimes if somebody forgets what they were going to say, you can sort of miss some additional bits of kind of useful conversation as well. Yeah,
I think that's very true. Steve Rowett, you were talking about going to virtual talks. How's that been working out?
Hello. Yeah, I mean, just the experience of where I live in Hackney in London is there's been a lot of local history groups putting on events, and really getting lots of people there. And I think that's been very interesting. It's also something we've seen at ECL, which is really quite a rise in the number of attendees to some of the extracurricular things that we've had on, particularly around kind of volunteering opportunities or or making connections within charities in London that would have been more difficult over the last year.
Yeah, we've seen a rise in universities having lots of things like the virtual and people have been talking about virtual cafes here, or going to coffee together and things like that. My team has a thing called a virtual co-location, which is we'll just get together and work or talk about work things, but then we'll also have a virtual coffee where we're supposed to get together and talk about not work things. And I can see that my team are in here, or at least a couple of them in. Do you want to come in and sort of give your perspective on that, the difference between the two?
Hey, Laurie, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hey, yeah. So I'll happily share my experience, because I joined the team just as the pandemic started, and so hadn't sort of met anyone in that team context, but B, hadn't really participated in many big meetings with you, and had to get used to what you were doing with the colos and with the virtual coffees. But I have to say, it is really nice having a regular meeting in the diary that you're just going to either have a very casual chat with your team members, or that you're going to find out some more kind of work-related information, but in a very non-meeting-y format. That for me has been really nice, and I feel like I have connected with the team quite well. I obviously can't wait until I see everyone in person, but it has really helped to have those as regular occurrences that we all tried to commit to come to. And I think it's that sort of commitment from everyone that really helps.
Thanks for that. And you've got other contexts that you're dealing with as well.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So, yeah. Okay, does anybody else have any questions or points that they want to make? Simon, you just made an observation.
I did. Excuse me. Yes, I just thought, given the nature, as I said, given the nature of the presentation conversation, that nearly everyone has their camera turned off. I work at Oxford Brookes, and I know I'm not academic, I work in IT, and from academic colleagues, they find that when they're doing online lectures and sessions and things like that, they invariably found that all the students had their cameras turned off. So we've tried to not have a policy, but more advice along the lines of, please turn your camera on, it makes it a bit more interactive. I think anecdotally it was because most of them were in bed at the time and they didn't want to be seen in bed, but it generally works with colleagues, generally audio and videos on all the time, but yeah, it was just an observation, really.
Yeah, I find it interesting. There's so much debate about the camera on, camera off thing for students. We've also been looking at it from a green ICT issue about the cameras, but that's a whole nother webinar. So I don't want to go into that, but it's a significant increase apparently when cameras are on. I find it is difficult with students who don't want to be seen on camera. It's almost like the students sitting at the back of the room rather than in the front row. So it's a hard one to have with policy in terms of making students do that. Alex, I quite like that comment. Colleagues I work with are all very stretched and feeling the pressure. They find it hard to find the time for informal digital connectivity. How do you encourage people to attend? How do people encourage people to attend these events? Anybody got any answers? Ellie.
Hi there, I can jump in. I mean, I think it kind of links to what you said earlier, Laurie, about people from all different levels within the organisation being present at these social events. I mean, in actual fact, it's Sarah and I who's also here on this call that have largely been organising the social events across the team, and we're in kind of management positions. And I think it just kind of sets a bit of an example. If we kind of are taking the time out of our day to ensure that we go along to the events that we've organised, we've certainly found that to be helpful, and more people are engaging with it.
Yep, I think that's key, isn't it? It's when we have our virtual coffees and our virtual colos, I think 9 times out of 10, our line manager, our deputy director, is there, you know, and showing that, yeah, this is important, and we're there. Michelle, you're making the point about students who have visual or sensory issues making off, and I think that's really key as well. I think it's got to be at the choice of the student, hasn't it? And yeah, bandwidth as well. I can see that, Jenna. Bandwidth is a key. We've recently got an upgrade, but there was a point where if I was doing a webinar, my wife couldn't be online. So it's, as she's working in a university as well, then that actually makes it very difficult. So having to say, are you going to be doing a webinar today, and can you schedule it according to me? So bandwidth issues are still a big issue, I think, for everybody. So yeah, totally agree.
Can I jump in there, Laurie? Sorry,
Yep.
Colleague of Laurie's, I'm Caroline. I totally agree. I live in central Newcastle, and bandwidth is sometimes a real problem for me, and especially when there's 4 of us on at home. And I know someone earlier made the comment about getting distracted by kids. I think one of the things that's really worked in our meetings is that, I mean, our deputy director, our line manager, I mean, he's often there and talking to his kids, and he'll just mute himself for a second, talk to his kids, and then come back to us. And I think we all just are totally accepting of that. It's just not a problem, because we've had to accept it. This is the situation that so many of us are in. Not everyone's got kids, not everyone's got younger children, but the ones who have, you just kind of accept that's just the way it is at the moment. And I guess it's that level of acceptance across the team. And what I'd say about our team as well, and Laurie did, stick a lovely picture of us up earlier, is that we were a new team last January, and obviously then Rose has joined us since then as well. So it's been really interesting year, I suppose, for us, or just over a year, in that although a lot of us knew each other and had known each other for a long time, we hadn't necessarily worked together before, and we certainly hadn't worked in the way that we're now expected to work, because we've had a complete restructure. So it's been really important, I guess, for us to have these to have that I guess level of acceptance, and just, all right, we've just got to get on with it, but we've also got to have some kind of connection between ourselves if we can't be together physically. But yeah, I often have my camera off, because otherwise my bandwidth's dreadful, and especially when my husband and 2 children are now at home as well working, it's just just doesn't work. Yeah, it's not about being remote, it's just about rubbish bandwidth everywhere.
Okay, Michelle, I'm going to agree with you on that one. Eyesight and headaches have increased, especially less so for the headaches now, because during the last time we were able to, I went and had an eye test, and I am now supposed to wear glasses during when I'm sort of reading on screen and things like that. I still keep forgetting, and I still don't want to, but it's really hard. And my eyesight is deteriorating, and I've worked from home for a long time, and I think it's just the volume of things that we're doing online. I'm not wearing my glasses daily, says Caroline with her glasses on. Also, just general fatigue. Is that something other people are feeling, and you're just too tired to engage with people? Steve, you just came to put the video on. Do you have a comment on that?
It's just a suggestion around this kind of screen time. And one thing we don't do anymore is phone each other, which you might used to do, and that's a very different process to a Zoom call in terms of your posture and where you might be. And actually, I've been encouraging kind of phone calls, because you can have a lunchtime walk, and even if you're, even if it's in the evening, discussing work. Well, it's a really different experience, much more intimate. The headphones on, kind of a hands-free kit, and you can be walking. And I think we come to this as a default mode, and I think we need to be more selective in how often we use it for when we actually need to do it.
I think that's a really good point. And I would say that I didn't hardly feel locked down at all during the summer, when I was able to get out and walk and take some meetings on my headset as I was walking, around, what are very, very quiet country lanes for me. And that really helped with a whole load of other things as well. So, yeah. And yeah, a whole day of screen time, but yeah, it is important. So there is a fine line, Rose. I agree with you about what that looks like. Yeah, and the walking meetings are really good. It's just knowing that people are doing it, because you start to hear things and it gets a bit weird. So if you are going to go on a walking meeting, my advice is to say, I'm going to be walking for this meeting. It's helpful. Oh, that's an interesting distinction, Michelle. We aren't working from home, we're living at work. I'm not sure if that's really positive or really scary. But thanks for that.
I was just going to say, Simon here again, just on that last point, I saw something, it was people have overused the phrase working from home or working at home, and I saw it was, you're not working from home, you're trying to work remotely during a pandemic.
Yep, that's exactly it, Simon.
I think that's what everyone's forgetting. And just a point about telephony there, yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think things are taking infinitely longer, even if I was working remotely anyway. If we had the means to speak to people on the spur of the moment, pick up a phone and speak to a colleague as I would just pop into the office, you know, go and see someone and say, well, what about this? It would take seconds. Now things just seem to take, I don't know, 4 times as long, if not longer.
Yeah, I agree.
It's very difficult, and I think that's one thing that as the pandemic's, well, when only February, March, you know, it's almost a sort of well, a year really for the UK. Well, I think we're forgetting, or we shouldn't forget, how difficult actually day-to-day life is. It's not just work.
Yes.
And it's the impact on day-to-day life and work and vice versa that we could soon lose sight of.
We have to find the space. There's a couple of comments in there which is really interesting. First of all, yeah, I will plug that for you, Steve. LTHE chat is going to touch on that tomorrow, and thanks for posting the link in there, Steve. Pandemic schooling, pandemic working. There's an awful lot of things that we've put into practice during the pandemic, and I think what we need to do as we start to emerge from the pandemic is take some space and think about what we really want to take forward. Because an awful lot of people are starting to put things in place and people think it's better, and we need to start really unpicking what are the things that we do want to keep and what are the things that are good for people and what are the things that aren't, before just sort of accepting this is the way we work now. Yeah, home infrastructure, totally a point, and we need to be thinking about that. There was a project that Jisc did very many years ago, and it was about location independent working. You know, that ability to work everywhere. And I think working from home before the pandemic was often seen as a bit of a negative thing. It's a bit of a, oh yeah, working from home, with a sort of a raised eyebrow. I don't think anybody's ever going to be saying that again now. And again, Naeem, yes, being a wheelchair user limits accessibility. Going to work, meeting colleagues, absolutely, and especially in a university where there is often excellent access issues that we don't find in some other parts of society as well. Okay, it's coming up to around 12:15, and I said that I'd be trying to wrap it by 12:15. Does anybody have any final questions or comments or ideas that they want to share in the chat so that we can just keep those recorded? Oh, thank you, Michelle. That's very kind. There will be an evaluation form sent out as per normal. And if you want to get in touch with me, or if you want to get in touch with any of my team and the sort of things that we're doing, then please, you know, just either get in touch on Twitter or send an email. And you know, Jisc is here to sort of support you with some of these issues and to reach out and try and find solutions. So we're always interested in hearing what your perspectives are. This research actually came, or this work came about as research into what people's practices were, and we started to notice that social connectivity was a thing. We didn't go out looking for social connectivity issues. So we are interested in all aspects of what goes on, because it tells us about the sorts of things that we might not be picking up on. So tell us everything and we'll listen. That's going to frighten my team. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for taking part in the webinar, and thank you for all of your brilliant ideas and contributions. We bring as much content to this as we're delivering, so thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Laurie, and cheerio.
Take care, everybody.